I think we're ready. So welcome everyone to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Monterey Bay Community Power Community Advisory Council. It's Thursday, June 20th, and I think we're just a little past 6 p.m. I'd like to welcome everyone, and I'll turn to the clerk and ask if she would please take the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Community Advisory Council Member Dr. Bueno de Bosque is absent. Hartman?
Here.
Osmer?
Here.
Wolfram? Here. Amasquita? Here. Stedman?
Here.
Groot?
Here.
Bazira-Wist? Here. Capron?
Here.
Vice Chair Levon is absent, and Chair Byron.
Here. Thank you. Mr. Hartman, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I certainly will. Ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 2 of the agenda is public comment on matters that are not listed on the agenda. Members of the public are invited to come forward and address this council on any topics not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments tonight?
We've got a few here. We're deciding who goes first.
I was counting up everybody. Okay. Here, I have a handout. I don't know where to. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Brett Jarrett, and I'm a member of the People for Public Banking in Santa Cruz and part of the statewide California Public Banking Alliance. I've talked to you about public banks before, and I probably will again. Our ultimate goal is a network of public banks up and down the state, improving the banking options available to public agencies, including Monterey Bay Community Power. Public banks would be owned by cities and counties, possibly in a joint powers agreement, just like MBCP. I often refer to MBCP as an example of how a regional public bank could be structured. Public banks will improve the funding mechanisms available for green infrastructure. Underwriting decisions will be based on what is good for the community. Interest costs will be lower, and those funds will be targeted toward community benefits instead of shareholder profits. Public banks are a key to funding a Green New Deal, including MBCP projects. Currently, our focus is a bill, AB 857, which is the handout I handed out, the Public Banking Act. It's a first step, basically setting up a licensing procedure so that cities and agencies will have a roadmap to follow for creating their own public banks. AB 857 has been approved by the Assembly, and just yesterday it was approved by the First Senate Committee. So it's on its way. With your help, we can get through the full California Senate and can become a law with the governor's signature. This bill has been endorsed by cities throughout California, including San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, Santa Rosa, San Diego, and closer to home, Santa Cruz, Watsonville, and Santa Cruz County have all endorsed. We are going to need the support of Senators Bill Monning and Ana Caballero, and I think perhaps you can help to influence them. So for a future agenda item, I'm asking the Community Advisory Council to please endorse AB 857 and please start the process for Monterey Bay Community Power to endorse this bill. I really like the concept that MBCP can endorse bills and influence politics that way. And Beverly has some additional ideas about how MBCP can and should influence politics. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's not Beverly. Okay.
All right.
Not yet.
Good evening, council members and staff. My name's Michael Saint with Citizens Climate Lobby, as well as Campaign for Sustainable Transportation. I'd like to thank you all for the hard work you do and also volunteering your time. At this time, I'd like to make just one observation over the past 8 months or so that we've been doing this. And basically it's concerning programs and how they come about. So far, it appears, just from my observation, that all these programs are coming from staff. Not a bad thing. I'm just pointing out what I observe. And the votes from the CCA to approve have pretty much been unanimous. throughout this year. Don't get me wrong, there are good programs being done here, but after 10 months, not one dissenting vote for any of these programs seems a little bit strange, or monies that might have been shared that might have been better used elsewhere. Let me take you back to the bylaws just to remind you what they say. Quickly, we'll go into an area called Section 2.02, which is the bylaws entitled Involvement. It says the CAC is formed to ensure that all parties, including private citizens, which I am one, organizations, whom I represent, government agencies, industry, have a local community group to provide an in-depth review of MBCP staff activities and policy recommendations to the boards. Under Section 2-03 reporting requirements, under E, it says staff shall work with CAC to create and find agreement on the best policy recommendations for MBCP. However, the CAC, as an independent citizens board, may differ in its opinions and ideas on staff recommendations and proposals. 2.03F, it says individual CA members may express an opinion on any recommendation, either supporting or dissenting. And what I'm trying to say here, I'm not saying it's okay to disagree just to be disagreeing. Basically, what I think we should be doing is to share these programs with your friends, your coworkers, and family, and any other people you see in the community, and bring back their input. And that's what the CAC, I think, was originally put together for, is to figure out what the community wants and bring back those ideas and then work with staff to form programs. That's just my observation. It's nothing negative. Everybody's doing a wonderful job, and you guys have a good working with staff at all times. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment and your review.
Good evening. My name is Beverly Deschaux. I'm the president of the Electric Auto Association of the Central Coast, and I'm also a member of the California Alliance for Community Energy and Californians for Energy Choice. They are two statewide coalitions who follow the legislative bills that are going through. And right now, there are about 11 bills that are going through the legislature, flying through the legislature unopposed, that will, if they all passed, would completely cripple and just invalidate anything that we've been doing for all these years to get the CCA going. I'd like to, and so I want to read something from the organization. I ran into, at an electric vehicle event in Aromas recently, I ran into Seth, and I ran into, I think his name is John Thomas, who's on the board. And neither of them knew anything about any of these bills going on. CalCCA is being paid $160,000 a year to be our eyes in the legislature, but they're being very passive, and they're not. The people in these organizations have been working on these issues for at least 13 years. They are lawyers, they're engineers, they're people who have been in the industry, they're very well informed, or some of them are just political activists who have been active for many, many years. I spoke with Mark Adato about this, and he suggested the possibility of our groups having some greater some relationship actually with you guys, so that you are kept informed of what's going on. Because, okay, let me just read a little excerpt from a most recent communication. A legislative coup against community choice is underway and not over by a long shot. Even some of our allies in the legislature don't understand the damage they could do by supporting nearly a dozen bills that would undermine the autonomy of community choice energy programs and their ability to best serve our communities. It is critical that we explain to our state representatives, and I would say to our community choice boards, directly and urgently, that the cumulative impact of these bills is to weaken community choice, our best vehicle for addressing climate chaos, while placing electricity resources under local control. So I know that AB 56 or I don't know if AB 56 or SB 56 has been followed, but that's the only one that's been followed by this organization. And there are 10 others that are equally as damaging. SB 155, for example, increases the CPUC control over community choice. SB 676 prevents community choice agencies from developing EV programs. There's another one which says that if we create a microgrid, PG&E owns it. The CPUC, anyway, I can send them to all of you if you would like to know about them. I would hope that you would want to know about them. And I want to be in a dialogue with you about how our groups can serve you and serve the community choice. I know that when the community choice was being formed, I followed it all through almost every meeting. And I know that it was the best solution that cities and counties could do for reducing their climate emissions. If all of these go through, it's going to be over. I mean, PG&E will have gotten their way, and we will be crippled. We will be crippled. I feel passionate that something urgent needs to be done, and I would like to find a way to be in communication with you other than having to drive for 2 hours through traffic to get down here for this meeting. So I don't know what you can offer me. I'm here. I want to be in communication with you about these issues because they're not being addressed. CalCCA is being very passive and saying, well, we'll watch it, and that's how San Luis Obispo was not able to make their, to come and with their CCA. The day they were supposed to go in, they were supposed to launch, the PCIA exit fee made it impossible for them to launch. That's why we have to have them on our group. So thank you for listening. And
Ms. Deschaux, thank you for coming, and thank you for your comments. We will be discussing legislative activity under the CEO's report a little bit later on today, but thank you for coming and for your comments. Any other public comments? All right.
If you have a response to the comment, then short response is appropriate.
Absolutely.
I'm not making a response. I'm making a comment. So I just wanted to acknowledge I've been going through the radio stations recently, and there's a lot of great advertisements for Monterey Bay Community Power on the radio. So it's nice to hear it. Good job. And I've kind of been going the spectrum of not just NPR, but a lot of different radio stations out there. So it's kind of cool to hear. So good job on that.
All right, so I think that concludes public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. Bren, Ms. Laird, are there any corrections or additions to the agenda?
No,
No.
other than what was posted online.
Okay, so everyone has the redlined agenda with the recent reordering of things. So that's all. That all counts as a publicly noticed, perfectly. Everything's good, right?
Yeah, everything is in compliance with the Brown Act. The reorder, the agenda revisions that Bren had posted online and made publicly available simply reorder some items.
Okay, so we have done some reordering on the agenda. Everyone has it. It's really just to put things in the right order so we can follow correct process. I think you'll see that item 4 is going to move to later on in the agenda. And so we're going to go to item 5, install and seat a new member of the Community Advisory Council. And I think I turn to Mr. Killigrew on this one. Mr. Killigrew, what are you doing sitting in the CEO's seat tonight?
Thank you, Chair Byron. I'm not Tom Hibashi. Our CEO is currently in Irvine at the Business for Local Energy Symposium. So I'm humbly sitting in this chair, and I'll do the best that I can.
So I believe you're going to take the lead on this item.
That's correct. So
Thank you.
At this moment in time, we want to acknowledge our new council member, Brandon O'Rourke, who will be representing the shared seat between the cities of San Luis Obispo and Morro Bay. We're certainly excited to have Brandon on board. He comes with a really rich background, having been such a young man. He's leading a really great movement called the San Luis Obispo County Youth for Environmental Action that's really helping to kind of bring up the youth and get them involved with environmental stewardship. So I think it's a really good effort that he's leading right now. He's also a part of the San Luis Obispo Climate Coalition, which I'm very familiar with right now. They're doing an amazing amount of work around carbon neutrality, waste, you name it, the whole spectrum, to really raise awareness about achieving and reducing greenhouse gas emissions within San Luis Obispo County. In the daytime, he works for a retail outletter in San Luis Obispo. He's also EMT Basics, EPR, and Wilderness First Responder certified, and he's pretty good in Spanish too. So on that note, we just want to welcome him. And I think at this moment, I will ask Bren to give the oath of office to Brandon.
If you can just raise your right hand and repeat after me, please. I, Brandon O'Rourke, do solemnly affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. Congratulations.
Pretty formal, huh? So, Mr. O'Rourke, would you like to say anything?
Is that how I work this thing? There we go. Yeah, the cities of San Luis Obispo and Morro Bay, we're really excited to be a part of Monterey Bay Community Power. We're going to be starting up service next year, and we're keenly aware that we're the front line right now for a lot of other cities that in San Luis Obispo County that may be joining. So we're really looking forward to kind of setting the tone for how the Central Coast can come together and create a stronger CCA together. So, yeah.
Good, welcome. But you're late, you know. This has been around for like a year. We're glad to have you. We're glad to have you. And we're glad you survived, I understand, a recent climb to the top of Mount Rainier as well.
Yes.
Good. Well, excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to item 6. And that is to receive an update on the MBCP Customer Needs Assessment as it relates to potential energy programs by none other than our Director of Communications and Energy Programs, Mr. Killigrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair Byron. And it's timely that we're bringing this up. The goal of this conversation and discussion item is just to provide a foundation and to kind of outline the complex but yet amazing service area and all the different customer segments that we serve. When you kind of take a moment back and think about that we currently serve, 3 counties, 16 cities, and we'll be serving 2 more cities next year. And you think about all the different, businesses and, types of people from all walks of life. I think we're really proud of the work that we've been able to do thus far in the last 15 months, just getting to know the community, getting to know the business community. But it's our starting point. It's the more relationships we build, the more kind of business councils or economic partnerships or committees we can join and just kind of be a part of the community and start learning from our customer base, the more we can bring their ideas and their feedback about this to the table. So we want this to continually be a two-way dialogue between us and our customer base year round, so that when we bring this back, needs assessment every year, it becomes richer and more complex and more dynamic. So for the first time out, I think all of us on our staff are pretty proud of what we've been able to accomplish, considering the limited bandwidth they have and trying to serve all the diverse customer needs.
Agreed, and we're looking forward to this. There's a lot of expertise on this council, a lot of knowledge. And for those that aren't familiar with some of the things that Mr. Killigrew is about to go through, I hope you'll ask questions. This is a good thing for all of us to engage on. And I know many of you probably know as much as anybody in the counties about some of these subjects. So please go right ahead.
Great. Yeah, and so just to frame out the conversation real quick, our energy programs policy, which was approved by our boards, was rooted in three fundamental things based on who we are as a community choice energy agency and what we're trying to accomplish per our Joint Powers Authority's goal. So our goal is to, one, tackle transportation electrification. How do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector? Building electrification, how do we address those needs there? And then last but certainly not least, distributed energy resources. How do we build up locally to kind of meet the increasing demand that could come down the pipeline, but also to create various resources that could be deployed locally? We did also want to provide a snapshot in terms of our service area from the lens of poverty, because a lot of the conversations that happen around Cal Enviro Screen and all the other kind of metrics that kind of determine how funds flow to the state of California, the Monterey Bay region is not necessarily seen as kind of an impoverished area. But when you look at the actual poverty index, you see some pretty staggering statistics. So this is just something that we are always going to be taking into consideration moving forward in terms of how we're going to develop potential programs to serve all of our customer base. So as I alluded to earlier, we have an amazingly rich network of customers that span the horizon of all types of business sectors. So, based on our conversations and looking at a variety of different designations, we've pretty much landed on these 12. So that would be agricultural, tourism and hospitality, the military sectors, it's pretty prevalent in this region, member agencies and government agencies, commercial and industrial, small to medium businesses, school districts and higher education, residential, as well as disadvantaged groups, affordable housing, transit agencies, and healthcare. So when you kind of take a step back and think about what we're trying to accomplish with our staff right now, we're definitely hoping to work with folks like yourselves to get inroads in these different customer segments and different business sectors so that we can kind of be a part of the conversation and create that two-way dialogue. So in terms of what we're going to set up is we're basically going to go through each one of these customer segments. And we've provided a pretty, I'd say, high-level assessment of what are the problems these customers are facing, what are the programs that are available, and then some of the challenges that could be dealt with when implementing the programs. Now, again, we are here to discuss this. This is here as an opportunity for us to kind of lay the foundation before we present our kind of draft list of programs. So again, none of this is set in stone at all. It's just kind of information that we've gathered from conversations and meetings and whatnot, and we're trying to kind of put that all together in some comprehensive form. It's like
Mr. Osmer.
Questions now as we
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
So, I guess as Mr. Saint talked about it, communications there from the public is that we've got a very superficial contact with programs as they exist right now, and I think as we look at what's being presented to the council, is that's what we continue to get is just a superficial view of things without much depth. And I think for me it's a little bit frustrating because at a point when you present a slide that has customer segments in it and without any definition, is there seems to be an assumption that all of us know what the agriculture customer segment is, or the military customer segment is how does this relate to the communities we live in? Residential, disadvantaged groups, affordable housing. Aren't the disadvantaged groups served by affordable housing, which are also residential. This is very superficial, and it doesn't feel like we're moving at all in the direction of having some real programs. And I realize that there's a lot of stuff going on, but at the same time, I feel like there's got to be a little bit more movement in connecting us with what's going on, or what you think is going on, with some structure to it, with some definition to it, because it's pretty foggy. I mean, is that a reasonable that a reasonable concern?
So let's have some more discussion around this, and then I'm going to come back to you, Mr. Osmer, and ask what would you like to see, okay? Go ahead, Mr. Cap.
I agree with a lot of the sentiment that Dennis is expressing. I think that this kind of presentation, although it's just a beginning, is what I've been hoping that at each of these meetings we're having a dialogue and a discussion and starting to drill deeper and deeper into the overall mix of programs, so that we're coming up, which I think is what you're talking about, we're coming up with slowly honing in on decisions about which programs we're going to adopt initially as funds become available, instead of just having you bring us individual programs after they're pretty much all baked and saying, do you like it or not? And, at that point, it's they've been really good programs. It's not like we'd want to say no, but I think what we're hearing is an interest in being more involved in the process of getting there.
Mr. Groot.
So I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to take a little bit of a different stance on this, is that we're only into this for a year now, and we're just kind of getting our feet wet with programs and trying to understand where we're at. And the expertise that we all bring to the table is what we're looking for to help develop some of these programs. And we got a slide up here about agriculture, and I'm taking the initiative within my community to develop programs that are suitable and fit the needs of my particular community. And I'm bringing those to JR and others here so that we can start fleshing out these programs. And so I think rather than sitting here and saying everything's vague at this point, we're in a process. We need to move forward and learn where we can, from each other, focus our particular expertise and bring things to the table so that we can consider them and bring them really into the real world, so to speak. And my aim is to bring programs to all of you that we can really get behind, but they also mean a lot to my constituency in agriculture.
That's a good point. Mr. O'Rourke, you want to say something?
I don't know if the chair would want to do this maybe in a minute after we get back to Mr. Osmer, but if Mr. Koger could expand a little more on, you mentioned the draft list of programs. You mentioned the draft list of programs. If you could expand on what that process is like, what you were thinking of for that process, that might enlighten us a lot on this issue.
So before we come back to you, Mr. Killaroo, any more discussion around this topic? I think I'm glad that you brought it up. And what would you like to see is the question I have for you.
Well, I guess I think Norm brought up something that I feel exactly the same way, and I'm doing exactly the same thing myself. But I don't think there's any consensus or any agreement or any path that's been laid out that shows that. I mean, I think there may be an assumption on our part that that's where we're going, but I don't think that this whole group is in on it, and I think we should be. So, I mean, I'd like to get a little bit better definition of these things. And I talked about this after the last community meeting, is the first slide up is on poverty. And we have now we're at a disadvantaged groups target. Is that poor people, or is it something else? I mean, in all these things, we need some definition. We need to have some focused path forward. And it's and I agree it's very early, but at the same time it's time to get some focus. I think it's time to start honing in on some of these things and getting some real definition of what these things actually mean. Because everybody's got a different, if you said, what's your idea of agriculture customers, I think everybody would have a different idea. So what is it as the agriculture segment? Who is it that we're talking about?
Thanks. So in terms of the way we're categorizing agricultural customers, it is those that could be vineyards, it could be growers, it could be shippers, could be the cooler in the stores. Anybody that has to do with any sort of kind of agricultural product, we have them as agricultural. But effectively, when we look at the rate base, are those customers ag like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? That's essentially how we're designating agricultural customers.
And so they aren't commercial and industrial.
No. Because they're on a different rate structure, but there are many agricultural customers who are on commercial and industrial rates, but they're kind of served differently. But if you have a customer who has a handful of Ag 5 rates, but then they have a couple A10s or E20s, they're still essentially, in our mind, an agricultural customer.
So, yeah, and I guess that's where I'd see, at some point when we get to the program level, is how exactly is that going to apply? And those differentiations become very important. And I think it gives us some focus at the beginning to say, okay, let's see, how are you putting these things together, as opposed to simply saying, okay, here they are, and we're going to assume that you know exactly what all these things are. All of us know what all of these things are. So just greater definition.
Mr. Amisqueta, did you want to say something?
Where I work, we have just an example. We have 66 units, and our community wants to put solar panels, but we cannot. We're not able. We don't have the financial resources to do it. Also, communities in Salinas, the ones that are very disadvantaged, there's a lot of public land that can be put solars and help those communities, but we don't have none of those talks yet. And I was thinking that if there's going to be money available in 3 or 4 years, we should find a way of what kind of path that we can develop projects that can help people and at the same time create clean energy and help the environment. And so far we haven't. I know that the programs they have here, they're pretty good, but they're not for a greater amount of disadvantaged people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I was thinking about something like, if there's a lot of public parks or parking spaces that are for the public, where we can create energy and pass it to the people that really need help. That was one thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stedman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee members, I think we need to get going somewhere. And if we get caught in the details before we get there, we're going to have a hard time arriving. And I think what might be helpful, when you talk about disadvantaged communities, that means something very specific to me. And that gets back to the Cal Enviro screen. And I think JR touched on that. That is not poverty. That means there's like 16 elements of environmental exposure, socioeconomic status, among other factors that go into actually defining a disadvantaged community. Poverty is pretty easy. It's income, basically. So we do have some impoverished areas, but we only have 2 areas, small areas in our 3-county jurisdiction, which are in Pajaro and Salinas. And that's it. Whether you like it or not, we don't like it. We don't think it reflects the true conditions, but Cal Enviro screen will be updated over time. But I guess my point is, one of the ways we could maybe address some of Dennis's concerns is perhaps keep a running tally of definitions, so that I know it's many of the agencies I go to, we tend to be very acronym heavy, And so we have a laminated sheet. It used to be 8.5 by 11. It's now 8.5 by 14, both sides, and it'll probably be a fold out pretty soon. But it has definitions so the board and advisory committee members can reference if there's discussion that talks about ag. We could maybe have a formal definition or something along those lines.
So, Mr. Killigrew, I know it feels like we lean on the staff a lot and as if having 3 boards isn't enough. But please, you can see there's some good resources around here that you can lean on as well. And I don't mean to deter anyone from speaking up and volunteering them as a result, but you're hearing where some of that expertise is. Mr. Osmer, go ahead.
Yes, sorry. So yeah, and I think it's a good point. I mean, and that's why I'm pushing for greater definition, because one of my goals in life is to get rid of Cal and Screen. So whether it's at the state level or someplace else, but a census tract does not a disadvantaged community make. We all know that, but the state has forced that upon us, and now we're at a place where we're saying, oh, that's what a disadvantaged community is, and we shouldn't be there. We should be defining within our area what we think these disadvantaged communities are, if they exist, and who's in them. Or is it a customer segment? Is it an area? Is all those things, I think, are a matter of definition from the very start. And that's that. And I guess my frustration is that we keep going back and forth in what these things actually are. And all of us, we're not getting much discussion. We don't have much of a meeting of the minds on what these terms actually mean in terms of how we're going to go forward.
Is it possible that we could come up with measurable criteria other than census tracts or whatever that would work to define what you're looking for?
Yeah, I got to say that San Mateo County, for example, has created their own index for disadvantaged communities, which is a really good deal, which is much more local and sort of supplants Cal and Screen. And I think in the Bay Area, legislators are now looking back at Cal and Screen, and there is a lot more attention to maybe getting rid of it in the future for low income.
So we could have a discussion about this for the rest of the evening, but suffice it to say that you got to be careful what you wish for. I don't want to own a designation of a disadvantaged community. That has severe ramifications with respect to socioeconomic status, housing, development, and all those things. I can remember a time when people were really afraid to call out any kind of a disadvantaged community for fear that it would end up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the one thing, and I hate Cal and Screen as much as the next guy, but it did go through a considerable public process, and as such, it represents the best tool we have available currently that has gone through that process, and it will be updated. For instance, in your neck of the woods, air monitoring data has not been incorporated into the model. It will be, and that should maybe produce some more desirable results, perhaps. But it's sort of strange to say we want to have desirable results showing disadvantaged communities. And especially with the monies available now at the state, people are getting in line and competing with one another to see who's more disadvantaged. So it's a difficult subject. We're probably not going to figure it out tonight, and indeed probably not in the next few years. But I think it's continuously evolving.
This is excellent discussion, and you know my approach. I always want to make sure you have opportunity to speak. I'm going to encourage us to get back to the presentation, though. We're not trying to make any decisions here tonight, but I think it's been excellent. Is there anyone else that wants to add on this particular topic before we move on?
Could I just ask one
Sure.
question of JR? In the slide that you showed about poverty, that was based on income, not on the enviro screen. And what was the idea behind those statistics in terms of programs? What were you driving at in terms of pointing out where the poverty is? And how do you see balancing that with, I think, the political need to spread resources across the 3-county area?
Sure. I think from a contextual standpoint, it's a reminder that we should not forget at all about the areas that are most impoverished in our region, and to make sure that, you know, we have that as part of kind of our suite of programs that we're going to launch out. And as you can see, you know, a ton in Salinas and Watsonville, as well as parts of San Luis Obispo. So I think the principle around it was to kind of ensure that this is always an ongoing element of our discussion, and that it never gets forgotten. And so that it can be part of our analysis and our kind of criteria is like, how does it fit based on the different criteria that we have for programs? And one of them is about social equity.
Thank you.
I deeply appreciate the thoughts and the feedback, and in terms the definitions, we'll definitely we'll work on that to make sure that there's a general consensus about kind of the different customer segments. So around agricultural, and it's been really interesting. We've had some really great conversations with a wide variety of agricultural customers, some of the largest and most influential in the region, but also kind of the smaller mom and pop shops. And the consistent themes around demand charges, the cost of electricity, also access to electricity. Some, you know, entities want to grow and expand their operations, but they can't get access to electricity fast enough. But then also about rate structure understanding. Are they on the right rate? You know, do they even understand the rate structure that they're on? Like, are there opportunities for them to kind of shift where they pump, or what time they do their operations? So those are kind of the three areas we've seen in terms of areas of opportunity for us. Some of the kind of challenges that they've addressed is around the need for on-bill financing, or some sort of, you know, maybe financing mechanism for the high-cost equipment replacement. And then there's not a lot of resources, like a unified resource base where they can go look for funds. That's been a lot of feedback. They have to go to one place and another place and kind of cobble it all together. And then some of the kind of ideas that we've actually heard from them, again, it's not staff kind of injecting ideas. It's kind of feedback we've gotten from actual customers, which is there an opportunity to develop a unique rate structure for the ag community, like apart from what's already existing there. Help support on-site generation or battery storage. Definitely equipment replacement and electrification, whether it's of tractors or forklifts, or any sort of equipment they're using moving towards electrified use. They also said that MBARD, you know, has a great job with their Carl Moyer grant program. Is there an opportunity to add on funds to that? But then also, if we were to design a grant program ourselves, make it as easy as possible. Carl Moyer is certainly becoming a really great asset, but if we were to kind of set up and do our own thing, that just make the process easy, don't let them spend countless hours trying to go through the process and deliberate on that. So, and also, you know, we've also had some ideas about energy efficiency, about how we can support, you know, water pumps. Right now, PG&E does have an audit program that they'll pay up to 50% of the audit. And then if they hit a certain threshold of like less than 50% efficiency, there are funds to do replacement, pretty significant funds. So is there an opportunity for MBCP to come in to provide the gap funding for that? So that was another kind of like really spot on idea that some customers had presented to us.
Mr. Kilgore, you may not know the answer to this, and I have no problem putting Mr. Shaw on the spot because it's kind of a legal question. But this on-bill financing is a tremendous idea and a potential source of essentially self-funding some of these opportunities. Can we do that at MBP, Monterey Bay Community Power? Do you know?
I think there is the potential for it, but we'd have to investigate the billing mechanism. I know MCE at one point tried to do it, but
Marin Community Energy.
Marin Clean Energy attempted to do it, and I think they did have a pilot program for a little while, but it shuttered. But that doesn't mean that's the standard to meet. So we're definitely want to investigate financing mechanisms and whether on-bill financing is a reasonable option for us.
Yeah, council members, this is the kind of thing that we've looked at state level. And on investor-owned utility bills, on-bill financing is a way for people to, you know, obviously do something like put solar on their roofs and then pay it off over a period of time. It takes a building up of cash for us to be able to do something like that, but I think it could be a very attractive way for obtaining funding. Mr. Shaw, I mentioned your name. You want to say anything?
Just that it's something that I think that we'd have to investigate in terms of the it's not out of the box prohibitive. It matters how you go about the program, how you would roll it out, and what that would look like. There were some challenges that I can think of that would jump to the front of my mind, but again, it depends on how that program would look more so than just a black and white
Okay,
would it work.
just wanted to plant the seed. I think this is a great potential opportunity. As we become more flush with funds, this is the kind of thing that the community may be interested in.
Great. Now for tourism and hospitality, sometimes it goes hospitality and tourism, so equally either way. So again, for a definition, this is looking at hotels, entities that basically support tourism from our perspective. So again, for some of the larger hotels, it's demand charges. And then all walks of life, whether it's small hotels, small tourist shops, again, it's the cost of electricity. A lot of confusing multiple rates around that in terms of like, which rate am I on? I don't know what's going on. And then also, guests are starting to ask for EV charging, They're starting to say, hey, I'm coming from San Mateo or I'm coming from San Luis Obispo. I'd like to be able to charge my car at your hotel. So I think that's always the lack of infrastructure at hotels is a big thing right now.
Of course, they want to charge for free at the hotel. Yeah.
Sure. Now, in terms of some of the challenges, it's more about influencing the influencers, and that ultimately is jargon for really kind of get in with some of the leading hotels and tourism entities in the region and partner with them about ideas and opportunities to kind of collaborate and use kind of a joint brand to be able to kind of raise awareness about this. Also translating electrification to the tourism and hospitality business, whether it's a small hotel or a big hotel, kind of looking through their kind of their energy portfolio and what they need on a basis of, they have spiky demand in the winter or summer times, and then other times they don't need it. So it's kind of getting being able to translate what electrification means for the tourism and hospitality industry. Some of the ideas that we've gotten back from the industry were about, improved cost and rate structures that would support them, the ideas of battery storage, better EV infrastructure, and then how to support them with energy efficiency on site. The military, and so when we define military, it's basically the federal government's armed services. As you probably well know, there are a couple of pretty significant entities in our service area that are part of the military. We're fortunate enough to have a pretty good dialogue with them. Some of the major challenges they have, because they're huge entities, they consume a lot of electricity. Their demand charges are through the roof. The cost of electricity is through the roof. But they're also trying to build in some resiliency on site, so it's something that they want to really move forward with. The major challenge is there's been a lot of education with us, with these customers, about what MBCP is, what's the value add, why should they be a part of us. So that's been kind of one kind of hurdle we've been overcoming. But through that, they've come back with us. They believe microgrids are a good opportunity, storage, re-envisioning rate design for large kind of customers of that size is beneficial, but then also partnering on energy efficiency. How can you bring down the load first and support them to kind of bring down their bills?
Bring down the load, meaning be energy efficient.
Yes, be energy efficient. And I'm happy to field any questions about each slide, so I don't want to shy away from any discussion. So when we talk about member agencies and public agencies, member agencies are our now 21 local government member agencies, the 3 counties and then the 18 cities. And then public agencies could be water districts, school districts, anything you name it, anything in terms of a public entity. Some of the major challenges or problems they face: limited staffing and funding resources, kind of like us in terms of our staffing. They have a lot of staffs wearing a lot of different hats in terms of being able to kind of execute on all the sustainability efforts, whether it's looking for grants or just keeping their eyes on all the opportunities that they can leverage. A lot of conversation about what does it mean to electrify your fleet and provide adequate charging infrastructure for that. For some of the bigger, member agencies or public agencies, really high operating costs for energy. It's just because they're big consumers, as well as high demand charges. some of the challenges is a little bit of risk aversion in terms of kind of jumping in full force to move towards this. Not a lot of funding available, not a lot of staffing resources, and effectively they have the will but may not have the way. Some of the ideas that we've been floating or they've been floating back to us is, better resources around both transportation and building electrification for the larger sites, storage, as well as distributed energy resources. But then we forgot to mention, but also energy efficiency as well in terms of us being able to help support them being more an energy efficient operation.
Mr. Osmer.
Yeah, so it made me think when you said that the military was the federal government, where's the state government fit? And of course, we got some big state government facilities, mostly biggest one probably in Soledad.
Yeah, that effectively probably put it, we'd have to recategorize and include that under this one, but very good point. So commercial industrial, the definition around there are essentially kind of major industrial entities, not on the agricultural sector, but for kind of, in our minds, it's commercial businesses that are E19s or E20s, and what that means is they consume a lot of electricity.
An E19 is a rate structure
Yes,
for a half a megawatt of demand.
Yes.
And a 20 is 1 megawatt, correct?
Correct.
So those are big customers. There's only like 200 of those, 200 E20s in the state or something like that. There's not.
We've got a few of them. Yeah.
Okay.
So some of the problems that these customers have relayed to us is, around resiliency, around access to power for expansion, the cost of electricity, and then the lack of available funding for them to do projects. Some of the challenges, lack of awareness around the benefit of electrification, and then despite us being on the bill, we're still relatively unknown. So it's sort of, it's a very interesting dynamic when you talk to a customer for the first time, and you're walking them through the bill, and then you're like, oh, and by the way, we'd like you to be a thought partner. We want to engage you, kind of solicit your input about how we can work together to design programs that may not be able to benefit you, but all customers similar to you. And they're like, well, let's just figure out the billing first, and then we can, we can talk about that later. But we have to have those conversations. They have been pretty inspired about the Smart Connect microgrid program. They think that's something that microgrids are a good step forward. Again, any support around, putting on distributed energy resources on site, whether it's solar, storage, or even wind. For bigger type commercial entities, what does it mean to electrify their fleet? There's definitely opportunities there. And then, of course, pairing with EV infrastructure.
But Mr. Killigrew, this is a pretty broad category, right? These are the 7-Eleven stores as well. I mean, it goes from quite small customers to large.
Yep.
Okay.
So, and then moving on to small and medium businesses. So I know there are a lot of great entities working in our service area supporting small to medium businesses on energy efficiency and audits and whatnot. So a lot of the lessons that we're learning from the customers as well as the stakeholders who are working with them are simply around the cost of electricity. Is there an opportunity for backup supply? And then, aging infrastructure in the building envelope. What does their panel look like? What does their building envelope look in terms of like insulation or the roofing or anything like that? Just kind of looking at the building from a holistic standpoint. Some of the challenges are, again, lack of awareness about us and the value proposition, lack of awareness around the benefits of electrification. When I say on-site bandwidth, that means like staff who work for a small to medium business, not only being able to run the business, but also be able to involve themselves with programs and opportunities to kind of make their business more efficient. And then ultimately, funding and access to capital to help kind of bridge the gap in case there are some significant dollar amounts towards that. Again, some of the ideas that came back, supporting energy efficiency, supporting on-site generation. This one I think is really interesting is there's still a lot of small to medium businesses that probably have never had an energy audit, but then also concierge services of how do you walk them through A to Z, as opposed to just saying, oh, here's a charging station, you're done. Oh, here's a little bit of insulation, here's you're done. But like really kind of providing a concierge service to kind of walk them through the entire process, from like doing the audit to kind of hiring the contractor to, walking through the process of the contractor. And then definitely if there's opportunity for EV infrastructure or for charging stations, and then a lot of feedback around, hey, why don't you partner with folks who are already doing this work and then just add on to it. Don't reinvent the wheel, but just be a collaborative partner with those folks that are already on the ground and having the relationships.
Mr. Groot.
So if I could offer a comment here, it being at one time a medium business owner myself, the attention to these types of details is way down on the list. I mean, oftentimes you're just struggling to keep the business going.
Yeah.
And so my question here is whether or not you can partner with agencies or even organizations such as the chambers to start getting word out to their business members that these types of services and programs are available, because the people do attend the chamber events and they do go to chamber meetings. And so I think there's a great opportunity to partner with some of our stronger chambers in the region here to maybe get the word out to some of these small and medium businesses.
Yeah, thanks for the suggestion. And I know we're definitely excited to have joined, I think, pretty much every type of organization in the region right now. So we're trying to, you know, with our limited staff, we're trying to be involved as much as possible.
And you're paying for those memberships too, right?
Absolutely.
So I just want to correct something I said earlier, but I didn't notice this before, but it's not true what I said. Commercial and industrial doesn't include all the small businesses. They're in this category. Okay, because investor-owned utilities, they lump them all together. C&I customers, commercial, industrial are all, from the smallest businesses up to the largest customers, are all lumped together. I think Mr.
Yeah, I just had a brief comment. Have you been in touch with I think in each of the counties, within the county governments, they have programs for qualifying businesses to be categorized as a green business. It's like certain criteria have to be met. It seemed like they would be great staff to be partnering with.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you. You know, we do have a tremendous amount of education in this region, so we wanted to acknowledge that and have this as a standalone customer segment. So just between all the school districts, whether public or private, as well as the higher education we have. You know, some of the problems this customer segment has addressed is just, you know, lack of access or available teacher housing. You know, that's a challenge, especially with the high cost of living here. You know, high operating costs for the schools, and then definitely very limited funding and very limited staff resources to be able to address some of the concerns for their operations. You know, it's interesting. A lot of them have a lot of land, but there is a high cost of development there. So it's kind of that interesting quagmire. But then again, the challenging side of the financial and the staffing resources to be able to do some of these projects. You know, some of the ideas that were floated back to us, again, you know, building electrification for on-site housing. You know, is there a partnership we could help support, at least through program dollars for housing for teachers, electrifying their fleets. I know our CEO is very excited about what MBARD's doing about electrifying school buses, and we're committed to that. We think that's a great opportunity in terms of reducing criterion air pollutants and starting with the education at a young age about electrification and the benefits of decarbonization. Potentials of microgrids at school districts or higher ed. I think there was some really interesting opportunities there. And then some other ideas they floated were covering the cost of, you know, technical education. Is there an opportunity for us to be, you know, partnering or funding, you know, energy and sustainability type education opportunities? Oh, yep.
Please, Mr. Osmer.
Yeah, so it seems to me, you know, as I look at the some of the legislation going on, it seems to me that there's a ton of money coming for electrification of school buses. Have you looked at that?
I'll defer to Councilmember Stedman.
Yeah, we're getting a ton of money for electric school buses.
Were you here for the presentations by the various public transportation agencies, electrification?
Unfortunately, I missed that meeting.
Okay.
But
Go right ahead.
we have been working with school districts, and we've donate or granted a couple electric buses to Monterey Salinas Transit, and we hope to do more. And we see a natural partnership with Monterey Community Power to get that out there. It's like anything else, though. These products are improving over time, and what's really good today will probably be a dog in the future. So it does take some preparation to make sure you're doing the correct research to make sure it's going to be a good fit for those various districts. But we're really encouraged by the amount of money that's being released to the state, and it's in line with the governor's directive to make sure that we're getting away from diesel. And it makes great sense, not only from the CO2 standard, but for public health and diesel emission reduction and reductions in exposure.
Yeah, and I guess that what I'm thinking a lot more of is like how do we balance the local needs against the available money elsewhere outside the Monterey Bay Community Power, and you know, can we develop some sort of policy or have some sort of idea about you know, that we fill a gap as opposed to add to a dearth, so to speak, maybe. And you know, that's just a basic idea when we talk about helping out the government entities, which school districts, federal government, and the state government is they may have access to other amounts of money that other groups, other customer segments don't. So how do we hone in on filling the gap as opposed to maybe duplicating?
I was also thinking about that, about the presentation we had with all the transportation people here, and some of them even told us that they got all these buses and they could not charge them.
Right.
Right? So this is also a good question. What is relevant? Where should we put our money in projects? Right? So we are talking about electric vehicles. If the electric vehicles are available and it's for public transportation, so it will reach so many people, why not invest in charging in a project like that?
If I may respond really quickly, we are. I mean, we're putting a lot of money out there, and so is Monterey Bay Community Power in charging infrastructure. We're very excited about that, but we're at the beginning here, so you can't expect everything to happen overnight. A lot of planning and considerations gone into that, and we will not give a school bus to a district that doesn't have a charger. That would be ridiculous. I mean, they wouldn't be able to. And I should say, too, it may not be a good fit for some school districts if they have a lot of hills or a lot of distances to travel. An electric vehicle may not be the right choice. Also, a lot of these, we spent close to $10 million over the past 10 years retrofitting and replacing diesel buses with more advanced clean diesel technologies. So a lot of these school districts have cleaner buses on hand, and they have to destroy that bus in order to qualify for an electric bus. So there's a lot of consideration that goes into the calculus as to whether or not you want one or will grant one. And we're happy, and we've worked with Monterey Bay Community Power to share those parameters. So there is a framework, there's a structure that looks at all those various those variables as far as whether it's go, no go.
That is interesting, because that's something that I would love to have as feedback. Someone come here, there were many agencies, and they expose all the problems that they have. But then we don't have any follow-up. You know, now you are telling us, oh, we are working with them or whatever, right? So it would be interesting if we receive a follow-up, a feedback. What has been done? Are we working with these people or not? Right?
Yeah. So, Councilmember West, yeah, from the transit agencies that all attended, that presented, we are in very consistent contact with them, trying to continually understand what they need so that, their voice is heard in terms of like the programs map that we're going to develop. So, anytime stakeholders come and engage and present to you, they become part of our network of our network loop of our dialogue in terms of trying to understand, everyone's needs. So yeah, rest assured we're having good conversations with them.
Mr. Groot.
So before we leave the discussion about higher education, I'm just wondering, and maybe out loud here, if one of the challenges is that we have a number of our community colleges and indeed even the Office of Education in Salinas who put up their solar panels and now maybe think, oh, we've done our part. And maybe we need to change the message a little bit about what they need to do to continue that progress and move forward, because they've got so many things on their plate. I'm sure they're distracted and they probably figure, oh, we got solar panels over our parking lot now. We don't have to do anything more. So I think maybe we need to look at the messaging there and see whether or not there's something else that hits the button.
Mr. Osmer.
And it really brings up, I think, with these programs, are we talking only about ratepayer funded programs?
Currently, yes. So the programs that the draft list that we'd present to you in August, that is essentially all funded by Monterey Bay Community Power. But in some cases, we would partner with other entities to kind of pool resources, much like what we're doing with Cali VIP, where they're investing $6 million, we're investing $1 million. But yes, currently the way our programs are set up right now is either pooling outside resources to combine our resources. But what I think you're trying to get at is whether we start looking at public purpose funds and whether we would administer that.
Well, no. I guess what I'm getting at is as we go along, it would be good to distinguish these things clearly. Because at the point where you compete against somebody else for state funds, other funding, is that that's no longer ratepayer money, but you're sort of leveraging ratepayer money, and it's a very important distinction. And in those cases, of course, it's not your program that you're doing; it's the states or whoever came up with the idea for their program that they're generally that you're doing. So it seems like we should have a clear idea as we look at these things, what our potential is for getting some money. I mean, I saw a ton of money for charging infrastructure too. It seemed like it was all over the place. So,
yeah, very good point.
So I sometimes wonder if this council feels it needs to solve all the major problems in the state. There is the Resources Board that's collecting funds on cap and trade and implementing a lot of programs. The Energy Commission gets funds. The legislature allocates funds for other activities through the Air Resources Board agencies. So these problems are being worked on. It's not our responsibility to try and solve and fund all of them.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. The idea is that we go after some of those funds.
Gotcha.
Not it's only our problems that we need to solve. But as that money becomes available, that we become a good vehicle to bring that in addition to ratepayer funding.
Well, and don't you think that a lot of these agencies that have been talking to us see us as a tremendous source of potential future funds as well?
That too.
Yeah. Everybody's looking for money. Mr. Killigrew?
Yes, and I would say I just the money that we're talking about here is your money. It's not our money. It's your money. You've given us the opportunity to serve you, and so I think we have to balance how to look for outside funding, but also make sure that we're using our dollars effectively here. Because I think the last people everybody want is like in a few years, if we haven't done anything, it's like, well, you've just amounted this war chest for nothing. So I think we can balance that out based on a variety of different parameters. But I think just from our perspective, we're honored to be able to invest your money back into your pockets. So
more war chest, okay? Less rebate, more war chest.
So on the residential sector, we're or at least defining the residential sector as, could be multi-unit dwellings, apartments, condos, single-family residences, And so what we're seeing around what the customers are facing are, cost savings are actually cost of electricity, the high cost of equipment replacement, whether it's going from, gas to electrified appliances or whatnot. The challenges of, do you own or rent? Do you have any kind of flexibility in terms of doing anything to the dwelling that you're in? There's been some feedback of how do you prevent the power shut off, the public safety power shut off. How can we support the residential customer there?
You mean for fire safety?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then ultimately aging infrastructure and very inefficient building envelopes. I mean, just from personal experience, the rental place we're in is just, man, it's bad. Sorry, but I can't do anything about it. And I'm working at this place and I believe in what we're doing, but how are there opportunities to really look holistically at the built environment for the residential sector and think about holistic solutions, whether it's from the panel to the insulation, to the roof, to everything, the windows, just really kind of thinking about, the housing stock as each one is an existing ecosystem. The customers face, whether it's looking at storage or the cost of equipment replacement is really costly. Again, as renters have no control over the building costs outside of whether or not they're master metered or not. So, multi-unit dwellings, collective decision-making, lack of resources. And then going back to our energy programs workshop, the general lack of awareness around electrification, like when you're talking to your contractor to do any sort of retrofits to your house, is your contractor talking to you about, well, instead of this gas furnace, you actually could get a heat pump, heating and cooling system, or for your cooking, you should look at induction cooking. So there's a lot of kind of education that still needs to be done around electrification. And then last but certainly not least, the fear of the unknown. Electrification for cooking and heating. I have had a council member say to me and a council member, there's no way you're going to take my gas stove away from me. So again, but it's true. People are very set in what they're used to and how they do. And we start entering into kind of behavior change of we're getting into people's homes and we're kind of influencing them. And so there's a really opportunity for awareness and education around all this. A lot of residential customers responded with us, hey, we're still interested in energy efficiency and weatherization and those things. Building electrification is a big thing if we can help drive down the costs. And then any sort of programs to help reduce costs in homes, whether it's apartments, condos, multi-unit dwellings, or just single-family residences.
So if I may, I have to interject on this electrification issue. I've gotten very excited about this, and I think this is something that's going to be a bigger and bigger deal as we move forward because it's something we can all do in our homes. I actually put in a heat pump water heater just yesterday, and I'm going to put in a heat pump heat exchanger next week. I'm knocking out my fireplace, and I'm going to an induction stovetop. And what I've heard from people that use them is once they use them, they never go back to gas. It's only the people that, like me, who have gas that are afraid to try them. So anyhow, that's going to get my house down to zero carbon. So I'm very, very, very happy. Well, and I think it's the tip of the spear. I hope that others will consider looking at these things. But it is behavioral change, and it's also expensive. It's not a cheap undertaking. So I want rebates.
Retroactive ones right here.
Well, obviously I'm not going to get retroactive, but I'll be glad to be an example. I'm sorry, there were a couple of folks that wanted to speak, and Mr. Osmer, did you want to go first, and then I'll go to Ms. Wist?
Well, actually, I was going to suggest that maybe fear of the unknown was taking it a little bit too far. But then I realized that my mother told me that you could only cook with gas. Electric was no good. So it's probably the right term is fear. I get that fear.
Ms. Wist.
What you talk about energy efficiency and it's expensive, that is a way to think about
energy efficiency is not expensive.
But it's not expensive. It's
Electrification's expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive also when you are building. And because you have to spend more. I just did that. We have to spend more money with our windows to get a very good windows and good isolation. But I don't need heat. I don't need, to make cool? Air conditioner. So, and there you are saving energy every month. And if you make, the count in the end, you are saving a lot of money in a few years, right? Or shorter. And I think this is the argument that they always used in Germany with the constructors or, business people, even to retrofit. Yes, you are going to spend much more money, but then they make the math and people realize, wow, I'm going to save a lot of money and bring the value there is very important to be green, right? I'm a green business, or my building is green, and people visit the green buildings and zero emission. And I think this is a good idea when we talk to people is about not only the sustainability. People want to know about the money. It's not that you are going to spend more money. Actually, that is an investment, and you are going to save a lot of money in the future and be sustainable, right? Yeah.
There's a lot to learn about all of this stuff, and it takes a lot of money and time to educate people about it. Mr. Killigrew, as you know, you've been working on this now for a year or so. Mr. O'Rourke.
I just wanted to comment briefly on the power shutoff point. This was something that was brought to our attention by some of our constituents out there, and it's something that we wanted to keep an eye on, because the power shutoff might be an inconvenience to a lot of us if it does happen in our area for a couple days. But for a lot of groups, particularly like disadvantaged groups, lower income groups, ones with medical problems, disabled folks who have to people who have to refrigerate their medication, or they can't get around without electrified chairs, things like that. Those are really big deals. And so we are hoping that things like microgrids and things like on-site solar and storage can be solutions to that, especially if we're going to be seeing more of these shutoffs in the future due to increased wildfire danger. So
yeah, we'll have a much better sense of that when the summer's over to see how extensive that is. Can we continue, or are there more comments? Mr. Groot has a comment.
I just wanted to follow up on that we had a conversation about that exact thing earlier this week, and the last thing we want to do is have a PSPS and then everybody runs out and buys a gas generator.
What's that?
The public safety power shutdown.
Oh, PSPS.
PSPS. Where's that card, by the way? Sorry. By the way, my lingo card in agriculture is 5 pages long now.
You guys ought to bring your cards in, and we'll give them to Mr. Killigrew, and he can print them up for all of us.
Publish them. But the point being is we don't want to have a panic where everyone goes out and decides to buy a gas generator and solve the problem that way. We need to come up with a solution in advance so that people are prepared.
We saw that in the electricity crisis in 2000. Certainly, Silicon Valley, when the ISO said, the independent system operator said, we may shut down, curtail load. Businesses like crazy, big companies went out and put in all kinds of either permanent or temporary diesel generators. It was not a good solution, but businesses do what they need to do. Is there Mr. Osmer had a comment?
Yeah, I think since in a couple of ways here. I mean, as the cost of electrifying comes up, and we're getting to disadvantaged groups with people in poverty, electrification at this point means increasing the amount of money that they spend for energy, and they
just the opposite, because you don't use natural gas.
Natural gas at this point is cheaper per.
Not for heat and water.
I can tell you, heat pump water heater uses less energy at a lower cost than natural gas.
Overall, I mean, it certainly, you get down to every dwelling is different, but as we approach this, we need to be cautious of that.
I hear you, and it's that initial cost that's the problem. That's why I suggested the on-bill financing might be one of the ways to do that.
Right, but it is absolutely not a certain thing that's going to be a lower cost or an equal cost to natural gas at this point.
Yes, it is.
So. Yeah, I simply don't.
Well, and you probably still want to use your gas cooktop too.
No, I can afford it. We're talking about a single class of people that cannot afford it.
They're the last people that have the extra funds to do this.
Yeah, and the other thing is, we talk about preventing power shutoffs is in PSPSs. With low income people, there's an ongoing power shut down for not paying their bills, which is a severe crisis in California right now and in our area too. So, but as we come up to talk about that as energy assistance, I think we need to talk a little bit more about that.
I don't mean to cut off your comment. I appreciate it very much. Mr. Capron.
I think just trying to tie this all together, I hope as we formulate programs early on, we will have a major public relations program for educating people about electrification, because it is something that, I think Norm talked about the, maybe the school districts figure they put up their panels and they're good. I think everybody thinks that. There's very little awareness about the need for rapid electrification. And as Monterey Bay Community Power, is starting to gain familiarity in the community and stature in the community, I think it's worth spending a fair amount of money on, and it's generally going to be cheaper than buying hardware.
Very good point.
So this is not what you expected, with this presentation, this kind of discussion, but I'm really glad to see it.
I was very prepared for this. I know.
And
this is what we want.
We're going to give it back to you and let you continue, but I do appreciate the discussion amongst my council. So go right ahead, Mr. Killigrew.
Yeah, no, discussion is really important. I think that's the whole goal of this conversation, is to get us thinking more and hopefully get the audience thinking more about other opportunities that we may have not seen in our vision. So it's important.
And if I could offer, I've never seen this kind of effort to break down market segments like this on the part of the investor-owned utilities. They look at C&I customers, residential customers, they do it for a different purpose. It's for classifying you in a rate structure. But you're trying to understand your community, and we're dissecting what you're trying to do. So it's not very... Maybe munis do this, but I'm not even sure they do either. So this is pretty unique and not common.
Well, I appreciate it. It's a team effort. So for disadvantaged groups, again, we'll work on defining that and make sure that there's consistency around that. But from our perspective, it's impoverished folks, low-income folks, people on CARE and FARA, whether you're looking at areas of kind of increased air quality issues, as well as kind of medical baseline, just folks that are effectively disadvantaged. So for the challenges or the problems, I mean, there's a little redundant bullet point, but or like the idea of the power safety shutoff and those folks being most vulnerable, impacted from it, is a major problem from them. The cost of electricity is a major problem for them. Just general lack of resources. I mean, as Dennis mentioned, as Councilmember Osmer mentioned, like there's disconnections happening and folks are trying to fight to pay their bills every month, and the electricity and gas bill may not be on top of their list when they have to buy food and whatnot. So, but then there's also a real issue with third-party energy entities knocking on doors and signing people up for very wonky, almost illegal contracts that can really burden them. So we've actually seen a lot of that in our service area, especially in South Monterey County and Watsonville and Salinas, with kind of folks knocking on doors and getting them to sign up for things, and it's been pretty challenging. One of the interesting things that we found a lot with, especially our farm worker outreach, that we're still doing to this day every 2 weeks, and we're excited that Monterey Bay Aquarium has actually come out and partnered with us on a few of them, is there is a lack of trust between disadvantaged groups or underrepresented groups and utilities, especially with us being a government, and they think we're the government. Right. So it's immediately a red flag. So the idea of us trying to overcome and building trust there is paramount. And then, again, homes may be unable to access services due to health and safety issues. And then also some other challenges around just, whether they own or rent their home, like just major, like can they have access to these potential programs? So the ideas that we've gotten from a lot of our outreach is more educational outreach and awareness to build trust, leverage existing programs, whether it's current energy efficiency programs, we can kind of add on partnerships and dollars, expanding Project Sunshine to more than just 20 homes and $100,000. The idea of promoting the use of smart thermostats with energy efficiency And then invest or support comprehensive weatherization programming, and then anything around the energy assistance program. But then also what can we potentially do around disconnections and that sort of stuff? How can we be a partner?
Mr. Osmer.
So this is what I do for a living, and there's a couple of areas I think that are really important to me, and as we look at programs. And I think the one big one that's really much more immediate is the problem of disconnections. And the PUC is currently doing having proceedings to look at how disconnections can be prevented. And there'll be a hearing actually on the 9th of July at CSUMB's Salinas City Center on this. It's going to be all day. But within the proceedings, Cal CCA put in some comments that actually they sort of follow the same line that JR and I have been talking about in how the CCAs may create a program that helps reduce disconnections. And it lays out some parameters for a program, and then it adds that the PUC should pay for it. So it's something that I think that we should look at very seriously as a partnership. It would entail doing some work with the PUC and getting the PUC to order PG&E to let go of some data, essentially. But I think they've laid the groundwork, and the proceeding is actually a great vehicle for that. So I think we could jump ahead with that if we get on it. And for my organization, we're certainly putting the resources into reducing disconnections, however we do it. The other thing that overall that concerns me when you say unable to access services due to health and safety issues is that that's something that we fight all the time with energy efficiency programs, is that they are completely obsessed with energy efficiency to the exclusion of health and safety. And it is not a benefit. I guess my best example is that you can put in a smart thermostat in a home with an electric furnace without any danger. You can't just go put in a smart thermostat in a home with a combustion appliance in it. You've got to do a safety check, because that appliance that you're controlling can actually kill the people in the home. So, and we are dealing with, in low-income homes, is we're dealing with a completely different housing stock than what's normal. And if we don't do these things, if we don't get the health and safety addressed, we'll never get to a different level in terms of carbon reduction and energy efficiency. So, but I think there's some what's going on right now in other CCAs is a struggle over whether they can use ratepayer money for health and safety. So we're working on a program right now with Marin Clean Energy called the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. And currently they are using outside funding, non-MCE money, ratepayer money, to fund this. But at some point, I think we should be ahead on this. At some point, I think we should develop some sort of a policy on how we deal with health and safety in low-income programs, and because it may not be absolute pure energy efficiency or carbon reduction, but it certainly is something that's needed in the community and contributes to the mission of the organization. It's just that some CCAs are hanging back a little bit because of fear of the PUC on how they'll look at this. So I think it's something that we need to really move ahead and address, because it's just got to be. It's inhumane not to do it.
I have to say, you're the expert on this. I didn't understand everything you just talked about. I'd really like to drill down on this more as well. Maybe not in this meeting, but talk with you personally so I could understand this better as well. Maybe you all understood what Mr. Osmer was talking about, but I didn't grasp all of that and how we have a role that we could potentially play. I'd be interested in learning more. Mr. Amasquita.
Just to add up a little bit of what he was talking about, a lot of the disadvantaged communities, they don't qualify for many programs because they earn very little money, $18,000. So they end up renting a home with 8 people in order to survive, and sometimes they don't even qualify for care or FARA because the amount of income of 8 people, it makes them look like they're making good money.
Wow. Okay, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you. Mr. Killigrew, press on, please.
Thank you, Chair Byron. Next one, and it's a little unique that we're calling out affordable housing. And I think the perspective about this is, there are 2 major challenges in this region. It's transportation and housing. And I think having met with, almost all of the affordable housing developers in the region, we see this as a strategically important investment to understand what they need, how they're building, what they're doing, and how to get in at the ground level to hopefully potentially provide programs so that anything new they build is electrified, whether it's with our program or not, but it's just a collaboration about what it means. And so we've actually had a few good meetings with some of the affordable housing developers, and then I'm actually sitting on the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership has got a housing committee of all the major stakeholders. They meet every few months, so I'm just kind of sitting with my ears open, trying to learn from everybody. From what the developers have said is for existing housing stock that they actually kind of own and operate, it's really costly to do retrofits. So that's one of the big hurdles in terms of going through and doing energy efficiency or any sort of retrofits to existing building stock. The stock requires a broad range of solutions. It's not a one-size-fit-all for each one. And another thing that they came back with was they need advance notice of available funding. Like, when they go through and they do the entitlements, they get the land and all that fun stuff. Like, if they knew about we were at the table, they'd be able to kind of at least provide some direction. The needs vary greatly dependent upon the project, so it's sort of not a one-size-fit-all. Some of the challenges of how to assist a build-out of 5,000 units or up to, the funding streams and timelines don't always align with what they're doing. And then also the timing of the programs aligning with the housing development process. One of the other things they mentioned is, the utilities package is a pretty significant thing for affordable housing developers. So is there an opportunity for us to be at the ground level to assist with that? So the ideas that they threw back at us were, hey, why not a competitive grant offering where you're able to offer X amount of dollars per unit, and then we kind of give you our best ideas, and you focus on that. Ongoing grant funding, support on building reach codes, support on electrifying not only the existing but also the upcoming building stock. And actually, we had one developer just out of the blue just email a couple ideas to me, and one of them was street light retrofits for some of their existing stock. Like, they're on old halogen, they're not on LED. Like, could be a great way to help reduce the cost. So those were some of the ideas, and we continually will work with the affordable housing developers, not only up here but actually now down south, so that we could support housing and move it towards electrification, especially if it's new. But then also keeping an eye on, we do have to deal with the existing building stock. Councilmember Wist, yes, transit agencies. So again, based on the presentation you had and the conversations we're having with the transit agencies, the high cost of charging the buses is one of the major challenges that they have. And they don't really have a at least a holistic approach to what's the best way to electrify. If I'm gonna, retro or replace 12 or 14 or 15 buses, how much infrastructure am I going to need? What's my bill going to look like? Do I now have to build solar plus storage to meet that? Because it's not going to be kind of a one fell swoop investment. It's going to be staggered. So how do you kind of plan for that into the future? The high charging equipment costs and also the make ready opportunities that they might not have. And just, again, the high cost of the buses themselves and the actual equipment. Some of the challenges they're faced is they're very not concerned, but not sure what the new commercial EV rates that PG&E is going to potentially launch early next year that would go to a subscription base. So instead of you paying demand charges, you just pay you pay as you go with the different amounts of electricity. Also the challenges they communicate were the metrics to ensure the effective use of funds, like is investing X amount of dollars really a good use of funds? And then like the siting and the charging infrastructure and all the elements that go into it. So their response was, okay, well, would you folks be able to potentially provide opportunities around storage or microgrids at bus depots or something like that, at like major hubs where potentially the buses could come in and charge and you have a closed loop system? Develop new tariffs for us. Could you create a standalone tariff just for the transit agencies or entities that are charging buses to make it so that they could charge during the day or whenever it's convenient for their schedule, but not get hammered by demand charges? They also were looking for funding for consulting to kind of look at a bigger vision of electrification from the transit agency perspective. That also, opportunities around EV infrastructure. And I believe this is the last customer segment that we have, and it's kind of timely because I've joined on to Leadership Monterey, and tomorrow is the big round robin. We're actually going to visit all three of the major hospitals in the Monterey region with the Community Hospital of Monterey Peninsula, Natividad, as well as Salinas Valley Memorial. So it'll be fun to kind of get on the ground and go see those sites. From our conversations with healthcare, building up resiliency on site. Again, huge consumers of electricity dealing with huge amount of demand charges. Those are the major concerns that they've communicated with us. The challenges is their site constraints. Like, do they have enough space to build up, whether it's on-site generation or storage? How does that kind of meet their current, their energy profile, whether they have other existing, power producing entities or sources? And then they've definitely thrown out, we'd love to see microgrids as a feasible program for the healthcare industry, helping with rate design, and then also how to potentially provide storage to curb the demand charges. So in terms of next steps, we're here tonight to introduce kind of the foundations of what we're seeing with customer needs, some ideas that the community has thrown out us in terms of potential programs. So we're going to continue to solicit input over the next month or so. We're actually going to be releasing a residential survey and a commercial survey it'll depend. We have, I think, almost 100,000 email addresses for our existing customers. So there's a chance that we could get a little bit of response or a lot of response, but I think providing a survey for folks to introduce us, also to give some feedback about programs, will be another venue to kind of solicit input.
These are important. Is this a homemade survey? Do you have a contractor? Are you following a model that others have used in the past? What are you doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we actually talked to a bunch of other CCAs, our sister agencies who have done surveys before. Some of them have done market research firms where they actually hired someone or an entity to go out and develop the survey, make phone calls and do all that stuff. And then they actually did some like A/B testing where they did that, but then they designed their own survey and it came from them. It was branded from them. It had a little more personal touch, and they saw a significant higher uptick in the homegrown survey than some market-based survey. So our amazing team here is working with, based off the survey questions we had at the Energy Programs Workshop and kind of based on some of the questions that we kind of pulled out to some of our customer segments, as well as looking at the other surveys that the other CCAs have done. That's how we're kind of aggregating it together. And it's I think it'll be 15 questions, so it won't be a long, drawn-out one. But we hope to bring that information back at a further date.
Is there a single goal or objective here, or is it just soliciting input?
Yeah. It's awareness, but also soliciting input about kind of raising awareness about our programs and what's out there, but also giving them a sense of saying, are we in the right ballpark for you folks? And if you have any other ideas, let us know. Then we'll formulate all that input to the preliminary programs roadmap. And then in August, we'll review the programs roadmap with the Community Advisory Council. And so basically, we'll kind of take all the different conversations and the feedback and the avenues, as well as the conversations that we have with you folks, and be able to kind of stand up a list of programs with a list of criteria, the cost benefit of them all, and then we'll be able to kind of rank and score and move on from there.
Mr. Osmer.
So what programs are you going to solicit input on?
You mean as part of the survey?
Yes.
Oh, so from the residential standpoint, it'll be kind of we're looking at if they're interested in vehicle electrification, or have they thought about EV infrastructure in terms of whether they rent or own. Like, are they looking at doing any sort of retrofits to their home, whether it's energy efficiency or electrification? Are they interested? Have they thought about storage? Is that something of interest to them? But just kind of in the general realms of what we could potentially service.
It just seems like when you get unfocused surveys that the responses become so general as to be of little value. And I think it's kind of like going to a restaurant and sit down and they don't give you a menu and they say, what do you want to eat? The first question is, well, what do you got? Well, I'm not going to give you a menu. You tell me. So, it seems like it should be a better formed before going to the next.
Because
the next step. I agree with the education part of it, absolutely. But asking them to return a survey is, I just don't know what value would be generated.
And to continue your analogy, of course, once you've ordered, that's what you expect. Yeah. So I think the comment certainly is, surveys need to be well thought out. They're a two-edged sword. They do benefit you in terms of informing you, but there's also the creation of expectation on the part of customers as well.
It's a very good point.
Yeah, and I think that's when at the start, I think that was what I was looking for was what's our path in this. I mean, is it that we're going to get the results of these surveys and then go from there?
Number 4.
Is
that the right answer?
Yeah, but
you're bringing this back to us.
Yes. Yeah, we're bringing you back the results of the survey, as well as kind of the variety of different efforts we've done to help inform what that preliminary programs roadmap will be. So we bring the survey back, and then we discuss that, and then we have the programs roadmap. So, as you all well know, our budget cycle is set up that we bring you the programs roadmap. You would support that. That would go to the ops board and then to the policy board to be implemented in October 1st, 2020 or October 1st, 2019.
Okay, so at where do the programs? I mean, we see the programs roadmap here. Where are the programs developed?
They're being developed right now, and then we'll be presenting that to you in August, the actual programs.
The staff's been coming at us with a number of the programs over the last year. When we've gotten a good taste of what the programs are that they're going to put before us. I mean, and they have already put before us for approval. I know you're probably thinking of others, and we want to hear about them.
You have.
Okay.
I guess that's my point. Is at what point When's it come back? I mean, you're going to develop in the next month based on what you've heard tonight?
Well, we don't meet in July,
July,
so
so,
our next meeting
yes.
will be in August, yeah.
Right.
They have a busy summer. And you know, Mr. Osmer and others on the council, we're still dealing with a limited amount of funds. We want things to move faster. We want more funds in the pot. There's a lot of things this council would like to see get done and this community would like, but it's going to take a while to build up. I think you used the term war chest.
But and to answer Council Member Osmer's, I think moving like the process, I will recognize could have been better in the sense of this needs assessment should have come earlier, and then you probably should have seen a draft list of potential programs we were exploring, so that could have kicked around, and then we could have presented a final list. So I think as we iterate each year, we'll get more refined in terms of how we're engaging with you folks around, you know, the programs that we're entertaining, and then what we ultimately would kind of present to you that would go to our Ops and Policy Board.
Of course, that would have been preferred, but it would have been completely unacceptable. We wanted to see action early. The community wanted to see action early. This organization has been in business for a whole year now. We want action. Mr. Kaplan.
I'm not going to be at the August meeting, and I just wanted to touch on a couple of program issues, and they kind of connect together around resiliency, and you mentioned the medical field. And I've talked before about that a little bit in terms of, particularly with the PSPSs, the potential of those coming up, which look like they might be common occurrences in the future, and we really don't want to see a bunch of existing diesel generators firing off all the time. So identifying hospitals and medical centers and other critical facilities as being maybe a good place to start off a program, and really putting an emphasis on battery storage. I think we look at the duck curve and think, well, is it really a good idea to keep deploying intermittent renewable sources like solar? But my reaction to that is that's a problem to solve, not to slow down deploying renewables, but to figure out how we can deploy battery storage so that we can allow a ramp up of how many renewables we're deploying. So I hope that's a component of the programs we're looking for in the next year is battery storage.
So you think you're done, don't you? We have a few more comments. Mr. O'Rourke.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back really briefly to Mr. Osmer's comments and to yours. Well, we will do this every year, and we will get better at it. The first couple years are really important. When you start, some of these programs that might go on for decades will start in the next couple of years with the work that we do now. And so it is really important to get this process right, not to be too rushed through the initial design process, not to feel like when we get to step forward that we're only seeing these things for the first time and that we're going to be a rubber stamp, like some people raised earlier. So I think back to your points, really making sure that this advisory council, which represents all of the customers that we serve, really is an integral part of that process, and not just coming in at the end of a rushed process to rubber stamp a program list that comes up. So whatever that means in the next couple months of making sure that we're really included on the process of designing that roadmap, which you're coming out with in August, I think is going to be really important to us.
Okay, any other comments? Then I'm going to open this item up to public comment, and I hope whoever speaks will be as brief as we've been.
Well, I wasn't going to speak, but there's so much going on. Okay. Michael Saint once again. Just wanted to thank Councilmember Osmer about the idea of adding money to other programs that fulfill a mission that's already taking care of that issue. I think it's a very important thing when you go through your discussion on putting money out with other people's programs to make sure that's not a waste of money. Also want to thank JR for his quote, for reminding us that it's our money. Okay, so that's a key goal there also. Understand last meeting there was an ad hoc committee formed in May. And I guess it was 3 and 1 alternate, something like that. So I guess they're going to go off the next couple of months and figure out what's going to go on in October, I believe. May I just add a suggestion? Maybe the next workshop should try and involve our disadvantaged community. I know that's kind of tough. The people are working 6 and 7 days a week just to make ends meet. It would be nice to get other people there besides the usual suspects. I've been to a lot of these workshops and I see the same faces all the time. I would suggest contacting, for Watsonville specifically, Nancy Fallstitch at Regeneration. She deals with the low advantage community, has lots of connections. I'm sure she'd be very helpful in getting people there for that idea. Some suggestions, I don't know if it could be specific. They'll look at EVs or they'll look at wind and stuff, and the lower income people really don't care about that stuff. What they want is more money in their pocket. So maybe some type of a title for that meeting. We just want you to have more money in your pocket. Along that line. And then maybe these people would show up. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, real quick, there will be a report on the ad hoc committee during committee member reports later in the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Groot.
Brett Garrett, I just want to say that it's really clear to me that this council has some good ideas about what should be included in that survey and how the survey should be done. And if there's any way to involve the council in designing that survey, I think that would be wonderful.
Thank you. Any other public comments on this item? Okay, so let's move on to, well, let me finish on this. Mr. Killigrew, thank you very much. It was perhaps not what you had intended because it was really just a presentation about your understanding you're increasing your understanding of the community that we're trying to serve here, but it served as a good launching point for us to talk about a number of different things. However, it is a little bit unsatisfying because I feel like we're boiling the ocean in terms of trying to solve all the world's problems. But it did stimulate a good discussion, so I was not discouraged, and I hope you won't be either, and I hope the rest of the council is not discouraged. We have a lot of things here that we're trying to do, and your input is extremely important to this. Having said that, of course, we could go on and on and on. There are more issues in there than Carter has pills. I don't know if anybody remembers that saying. Let's move to item number 7, the consent agenda. I know it's if you're laughing at the fact that we're just getting the consent agenda, don't worry. We're going to take a break right after the consent agenda so that Mr. Killigrew can take a breath before we go on to item number 8. So, approval of the minutes of the May 16th, 2019 meeting of the Community Advisory Council.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you. Oh, we do
Second.
public comment first.
Well, before we vote.
Yes, of course. I have a second from Mr. Osmer. Public comment on the meeting minutes. Seeing none, I would like to have a vote. All of those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstention? Okay. Well, I guess we don't always have unanimous votes then. Okay. I think we should take a short break. It's been almost 2 hours, and we will try and keep this brief. It's primarily a bio break. So we'll be, I have 7:55, so let's do 8:05 for return. Thank you all.